You've got to be kidding me, Zixilorp groaned, his tentacles writhing in disbelief as he stared at the holographic announcement. They're allowing what on campus now? His roommate, Blurp, a gelatinous blob with eye stalks, oozed closer to read the message. Says here, in the spirit of interspecies understanding and cultural exchange, students are now permitted to bring their domesticated companions to class hall. Guess the dean's been hitting the fermented nectars again. Zixilorp's epidermis flushed a deep purple. But some of those Deathworlders have monsters as pets. Remember that time Jeeks Thar showed us pictures of his dog? I had nightmares for a week. Oh, come on, Blurp gurgled, rolling all 7 of his eyes. How bad could it be? Maybe they'll bring some cute, fluffy creatures that'll make even your cold, deteriorating heart melt. Little did they know, the next day would go down in Galactic University history as the Day of 1,000 Screams. Or, as the humans would later call it, bring your badass pet to school day. Professor Jinthrop slithered into the lecture hall, his scales glistening under the artificial lights. As the foremost expert on cynobiology in the Andromeda Galaxy, he prided himself on being unflappable. That is, until he saw what awaited him. The usual sea of tentacles, antennae, and assorted alien appendages was now punctuated by, dear void, what were those things? In the front row, a human student, Todd, if he remembered correctly, sat with what appeared to be a furry, 4-legged killing machine on his lap. The beast's tongue lolled out of its mouth, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Mr. Todd Zinthrop began, trying to keep his voice steady. What in the name of the 7 moons is that? Todd beamed, scratching the creature behind its pointed ears. This is Rex, my German shepherd. Isn't he adorable? The adorable Rex chose that moment to let out a thunderous bark, causing half the class to leap or ooze several feet in the air. Adorable. Right, Zinthrop muttered, making a mental note to update his will later. And Ms. Jar, what's that? Writhing mass on your shoulders. Lisa Zhao. Another human. Grinned as she stroked the scaled coils draped around her neck. This is Noodle, my ball python. Don't worry, she's friendly. A Phloxian student in the back promptly fainted, their chlorophyll-based circulatory system unable to handle the shock. Synthrop's gaze darted around the room, taking in the menagerie of earth creatures. There was a ferret darting in and out of a Glee student's many pockets, a parrot mimicking the mating call of a Betelgeusean much to the Betelgeusean's embarrassment. And was that a tarantula crawling up the wall? Right, Zinthrop said, his usually melodious voice now a strained squeak. Let's begin our lesson on non-threatening herbivores of the Cygnus system, shall we? As the professor attempted to start his lecture, chaos ensued. The ferret, apparently bored with the Glee student's pockets, decided to make a break for it. It darted across desks, causing a wave of shrieks and flailing limbs as it went. Bandit. Come back here, yelled the ferret's owner, a lanky human named Alex, as he chased after his pet. Meanwhile, the parrot had taken flight, circling the room and squawking out a mixture of earth profanities and alien mating calls. The Betelgeusean student was now a mortified shade of chartreuse, trying to explain to his classmates that no, he wasn't actually proposing a mass orgy. Amidst the pandemonium, Todd's German shepherd, Rex, decided that the ferret looked like a fun playmate. With a joyful woof, he leapt from Todd's lap and joined the chase, his powerful legs easily clearing rows of desks. Professor Zinthrop watched in horror as his carefully planned lesson devolved into what looked like a scene from a slapstick comedy. He briefly considered retiring on the spot, perhaps to a nice, quiet gas giant where the only life forms were simple hydrogen-based microbes. While chaos reigned in the lecture hall, the cafeteria was experiencing its own brand of mayhem. Grick, the Arcturian lunch lady, had seen many strange things in her centuries of slinging space slop, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight of a human casually eating with one hand while dangling a mouse in the other. Sweetie, she chittered nervously at the human girl. I think you dropped your... The girl looked up, confused. Oh, this isn't a snack. It's for Mr. Whiskers. She gestured to a glass tank on the table, where a... Oh, void preserve us, was that a snake? Grick watched in horror as the girl dropped the mouse into the tank. Mr. Whiskers, it seemed, was not a picky eater. At another table, a group of Andromedans were cautiously poking at their lunch with their psionic probes, too distracted by the golden retriever sitting patiently by its human side. Is it going to eat us? One of them whispered. The dog's owner, a burly human named Mike, laughed. Nah, Buddy here only eats dog food, and the occasional homework assignment. The Andromedans didn't seem reassured, especially when Buddy let out an earth-shattering sneeze, accidentally launching a glob of drool across 3 tables. In the corner, a particularly brave Venusian had struck up a conversation with Emily, a petite human who was cradling what looked like a ball of sentient cotton. "So, what's that?" the Venusian asked, pointing a tentacle at the fluffy creature. Emily beamed. "This is Snowball, my Angora rabbit. Want to pet her?" The Venusian hesitantly extended a tentacle, only to yank it back with a yelp when Snowball twitched her nose. It moved. The fur moved on its own. Emily couldn't help but giggle. "That's just how rabbits are. They're harmless, I promise." "Harmless," the Venusian exclaimed. "It has claws and teeth. On my planet, anything with claws and teeth is classified as a Class 3 extinction-level threat." As if on cue, Snowball chose that moment to let out an adorable little sneeze, causing the Venusian to leap backwards, knocking over 3 chairs and a very confused Martian in the process. The cafeteria's peace was further disrupted when a human student named Jake walked in, leading what appeared to be a miniature dinosaur on a leash. "Everyone, meet Snappy Jake," announced proudly, patting the scaly creature's head. The entire cafeteria fell silent, all eyes and various sensory organs fixed on the reptilian beast. Is that a Terran swamp dragon?" Grulick asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake grinned. "Close. This is an alligator. They're related to dinosaurs, actually. Snappy here is still young, so he's allowed inside. When he's full grown, he'll have to stay in the campus pond." The idea that this terrifying creature was considered young sent a collective shudder through the alien students. Several of them made mental notes to avoid the campus pond for the remainder of their academic careers. Snappy, oblivious to the terror he was causing, let out a yawn that displayed rows of razor-sharp teeth. A Plutonian student promptly fainted, overwhelmed by the sight. "Don't worry," Jake said, misinterpreting the alien's stunned silence for awe. "Snappy's really friendly. He even knows tricks. Want to see him roll over?" Before anyone could politely or not so politely decline, Jake gave a hand signal, and Snappy the alligator began to roll on the cafeteria floor like an armored reptilian barrel. The sight of a prehistoric killing machine performing circus tricks was apparently too much for the alien students to process. In a matter of seconds, the cafeteria had emptied, leaving only the bemused humans and their assorted pets. Jake mused, scratching Snappy's scaly head. "Tough crowd." Back in the lecture hall, Professor Sinthrop had finally managed to restore some semblance of order. The ferret had been caught, the parrot had been bribed into silence with a packet of crackers, and Rex the German Shepherd was once again seated calmly by Todd's side. "Now then," Sinthrop said, trying to ignore the way his scales were still quivering from stress, "let's try this again. Today we'll be discussing the evolutionary adaptations of non-threatening herbivores in the Cygnus system. Can anyone name an example?" A tentative tentacle rose in the back of the room. It belonged to Zixilorp, who had spent most of the class trying to become one with his chair. "Yes, Mr. Zixilorp," Sinthrop prompted, grateful for the semblance of normalcy. "Well," Zixilorp began, his voice shaky, "there's the Flufferless harmlessis, known for its soft fur and complete lack of teeth or claws." "Excellent," Sinthrop exclaimed. "And can you describe its defense mechanisms?" Zixilorp nodded, gaining confidence. "When threatened, the Flufferless harmlessis releases a cloud of spores that induce feelings of peace and tranquility in potential predators." "Very good," Sinthrop said. "Now, can anyone tell me why?" He was interrupted by a snort of laughter from one of the human students. "I'm sorry," said Sarah, a freckled girl with a cat curled up in her lap, "but that sounds like the most boring animal ever. Where's the excitement? The danger?" Sinthrop blinked in confusion. "Excitement? Danger? My dear, the whole point of these creatures is to avoid danger at all costs. But where's the fun in that?" Todd chimed in, still scratching Rex behind the ears. "Half the joy of having a pet is the element of unpredictability. You never know when they might surprise you." The alien students exchanged baffled looks. The idea of willingly introducing an element of unpredictability into one's life was utterly foreign to most of them. Perhaps Sinthrop said carefully, "This would be a good opportunity for some cultural exchange. Humans, why don't you tell us more about your relationships with your companions?" And so began the strangest xenobiology lesson in the history of Galactic University. The humans took turns explaining their pets, each story more bewildering than the last to the alien audience. Lisa spoke about how her ball python, Noodle, helped her relax after a stressful day. "There's something soothing about watching her slither around her terrarium," she said, as several alien students scooted their chairs away from her. Alex regaled the class with tales of his ferret's escapades. "Bandit here once stole every left sock in my dorm," he said proudly, as if this were some great accomplishment. It took me weeks to find where he'd hidden them. The alien students couldn't fathom why anyone would keep a kleptomaniac creature in their living space, let alone boast about its misdeeds. But it was Sarah's story about her cat, Whiskers, that really threw the class for a loop. "So there I was, sound asleep," she began, "when suddenly, at 3 a.m., I feel this weight on my chest. I open my eyes and there's Whiskers staring right at me, his face about an inch from mine." The alien students leaned in, anticipating some tale of narrow escape from this midnight stalker. And then Sarah continued, grinning. "He boops me on the nose with his paw and meows for food." It was adorable. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Zexilop's tentacles tying themselves into stress knots. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly. "This creature stalks you in your sleep, wakes you at odd hours and demands food. And you find this endearing?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, that's just how cats show love." The alien students exchanged looks of pure bafflement. The humans' definition of love seemed to have a lot in common with what most species would classify as psychological torture. As the lesson continued, it became clear that the humans' relationships with their pets were far more complex than the aliens had initially assumed. These weren't just animals kept for practical purposes, they were friends, confidants, and in many cases, beloved family members. The concept was so foreign, so utterly bizarre to the alien students, that they found themselves oddly fascinated. Despite their initial fear, they began to ask questions, trying to understand this strange human custom. "But why," asked a Syrian student, his antenna twitching in confusion, "would you willingly share your living space with a predator?" Todd grinned, giving Rex a belly rub. "Because they're loyal, loving, and great companions. Plus, have you seen how cute they are when they're sleeping?" As if on cue, Rex rolled over, his tongue lolling out in a doggy grin. Several alien students cooed in spite of themselves. "Fascinating," Professor Sinthrop mused, his scientific curiosity overcoming his initial fear. "It seems that humans have developed a symbiotic relationship with these creatures, but surely there must be drawbacks." The humans looked at each other, shrugging. "Well," Alex said, "Bandit did once chew through my quantum physics homework, trying to explain that to Professor Wyzak was interesting. And Noodle has a habit of escaping her terrarium," Lisa added. "You haven't lived until you've had to explain to your Zorgax roommate why there's a snake in the shower." Instead of being horrified, the alien students found themselves chuckling at these anecdotes. The humans' ability to find humor in potentially dangerous situations was both baffling and oddly admirable. As the class wore on, the initial terror began to give way to cautious curiosity. By the time the lesson ended, several alien students were even brave enough to approach the humans and their pets, asking to touch or interact with the strange Earth creatures. Zixilorb, who had spent most of the class in a state of high anxiety, found himself reluctantly petting Rex. To his surprise, the dog's fur was soft and the rhythmic thumping of Rex's tail was oddly soothing. "You know," Zixilorb said to Todd, his tentacles finally beginning to unknot, "I think I'm starting to understand why you keep these creatures around. There's something comforting about them." Todd beamed. "See, I told you Rex was a good boy. Who knows? Maybe you'll end up getting a pet of your own someday." Zixilorp's epidermis turned a pale green at the thought, but he didn't immediately dismiss the idea. After all, if today had taught him anything, it was that the universe was full of surprises. As the day drew to a close, the alien students found themselves gathered in the common room, excitedly discussing their experiences with the human pets. "Did you see the way that ferret moved?" Blurp bubbled enthusiastically. "It was like a furry liquid." Zexilorb, who had finally emerged from under his desk, grudgingly admitted, "I suppose some of them were less terrifying than anticipated." "That rabbit creature was almost tolerable." "Almost tolerable," Blurp exclaimed. "I saw you petting it when you thought no one was looking. You even smiled." Zixilop's tentacles twisted in embarrassment. "I was merely conducting a tactile examination for scientific purposes," he muttered unconvincingly. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Sinthrop, who slithered into the common room looking exhausted but exhilarated. "Well, students, I hope today has been educational. I must admit my perspective on human-animal relationships has been significantly broadened." The professor's words were punctuated by a cacophony of barks, meows, squawks, and hisses as the human students and their pets filed past the common room, heading back to their dorms. Blurp mused, watching as a student walked by with a hedgehog perched on their shoulder. Maybe we've been too quick to judge the humans. If they can form bonds with creatures so different from themselves, perhaps there's hope for greater understanding between all species. Zixilorp nodded thoughtfully, his tentacles relaxing for the first time that day. You may be right. Though I still think I'll stick to non-carnivorous companions, thank you very much. As if on cue, a small, round robot rolled into the room, beeping cheerfully. It was Zixilorp's cleaning droid, a gift from his parents to help keep his dorm tidy. Now this, Zixilorp said, patting the droid affectionately, is my kind of pet. No teeth, no claws, and it actually cleans up after itself. The alien students laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. As they continued to chat about their experiences, a new sense of camaraderie filled the air. It seemed that the humans' love for their animal companions had, in its own way, brought the diverse student body closer together. Outside the window, as the twin moons of the campus planet rose in the purple sky, a chorus of howls echoed across the grounds. The humans' dogs were singing their nightly song, a haunting melody that sent shivers down alien spines, but now those shivers were tinged with something new, appreciation. The next morning, the Galactic University campus was abuzz with excitement. Word of the previous day's events had spread like wildfire, and now even those who hadn't been present were eager to see the humans' pets for themselves. As Zixilorp made his way to his first class, he couldn't help but notice the change in atmosphere. Alien students who had once given the humans a wide berth were now approaching them, curiosity overcoming their initial fear. In the quad, a small crowd had gathered around Sarah and her cat, Whiskers. The feline was basking in the attention, purring loudly as tentacles, pincers, and various alien appendages gently stroked its fur. And you say this vibration is a sign of contentment, a Neptunian student asked, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with fascination. Sarah nodded, smiling. Yep, that's right. When cats purr, it usually means they're happy or relaxed. Fascinating, the Neptunian exclaimed. On my world, vibrations usually indicate imminent seismic activity or a mating call. Whiskers, unaware of the interstellar cultural exchange he was facilitating, simply rolled over, presenting his belly for more pets. As Zixilorp watched this interaction, he felt a strange warmth in his central cavity. It was oddly heartwarming to see such diverse species finding common ground over something as simple as a furry earth creature. His musings were interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Todd standing there, Rex the German Shepherd sitting obediently by his side. Hey, Zixilorp, Todd said cheerfully. Rex here was wondering if you'd like to play fetch with him. He really enjoyed meeting you yesterday. Zixilorp's tentacles curled in surprise. What? Play fetch. Todd held up a small, bright yellow ball. It's easy. You just throw this and Rex brings it back. It's his favorite game. Zixilorp eyed the ball suspiciously, then looked at Rex. The dog's tongue was lolling out, his tail wagging enthusiastically. Despite himself, Zixilorp felt the corners of his mouth analog twitch upward. Well, he said slowly, I suppose one game couldn't hurt. For scientific purposes, of course. Todd grinned, handing over the ball. Of course. Just give it a throw. Zixilorp took the ball in one tentacle, wound up, and threw it across the quad with surprising force. Rex took off like a shot, his powerful legs carrying him swiftly across the grass. As the alien students watched in amazement, Rex snatched the ball out of the air with a graceful leap, then turned and raced back to Zixilorp. The dog dropped the ball at Zixilorp's feet, looking up expectantly. He brought it back, Zixilorp said, a note of wonder in his voice. That's the game, Todd laughed. Want to throw it again? To everyone's surprise, including his own, Zixilorp nodded eagerly. Yes, I think I do. As Zixilorp continued to play fetch with Rex, more alien students gathered around, watching in fascination. Soon others were asking to try throwing the ball, and before long, an impromptu interspecies fetch tournament had broken out on the quad. Professor Sinthrop, passing by on his way to the faculty lounge, paused to watch the scene. A smile played across his scaly features as he saw Zixilorp, who had been practically catatonic with fear just yesterday, laughing and playing with the earth dog as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Remarkable, Sinthrop murmured to himself. Simply remarkable. As the days passed, the presence of earth pets on campus began to feel less like a novelty and more like a natural part of university life. The alien students, for their part, were adapting to their new furry and scaly and feathery classmates with surprising speed. In Professor Zink Sinthrop's xenobiology class, The curriculum had been unofficially expanded to include regular show and tell sessions where the human students would bring in their pets and discuss their care, behavior, and evolutionary history. Today, Lisa announced, Noodle the ball python draped around her shoulders, "We're going to talk about snake shedding." The alien students leaned forward, a mix of fascination and residual nervousness on their faces. "You see," Lisa continued, gently stroking Noodle's scales, "snakes shed their skin periodically as they grow. It's called ecdysis." She proceeded to explain the process in detail, even showing holographic images of snakes in various stages of shedding. The alien students watched in rapt attention, their initial fear of the reptile giving way to scientific curiosity. "That's actually quite interesting," Zixilorp admitted, his tentacles twisting in a gesture of thoughtfulness. "It's not dissimilar to the molting process of the Arcturus sand dwellers." Lisa beamed. "Exactly. There are a lot of similarities between Earth creatures and animals from other planets. We're not so different after all." This sentiment was echoed across campus as the alien students began to draw parallels between the Earth pets and the fauna of their own worlds. The Syrians, for instance, found that the loyalty of dogs reminded them of their own symbiotic relationships with the empathic fungi of their homeworld. Even the Arcturian lunch lady, Grick, had come around. She had taken to saving scraps for the various pets, delighting in their obvious enjoyment of her cooking, a stark contrast to the polite tolerance most students showed towards cafeteria food. "You know," she chittered to Mike one day as she slipped Buddy the golden retriever a treat, "these Earth beasties aren't so bad once you get to know them. Reminds me of the glow worms we used to keep back home. Much furrier, of course, but just as sweet." Mike grinned, scratching Buddy behind the ears. "They have a way of growing on you, don't they?" As the semester progressed, an unexpected trend began to emerge. Some of the alien students, inspired by their human classmates, had started to express interest in adopting pets of their own. This led to some interesting challenges. "No," Blurp Zixilorp sighed for what felt like the 100th time, "you can't adopt an Earth shark. For one thing, where would you keep it? Our dorm room barely fits your gelatinous mass as it is." Blurp's eye stalks drooped in disappointment. "But they're so sleek and efficient. Did you know they have to keep swimming or they'll die? That's dedication." Zixilorp's tentacles knotted in exasperation. "That's not a pet. That's a perpetual motion machine with teeth." Meanwhile, the Betelgeusian student who had been embarrassed by the parrot's mimicry on the first day had become oddly fascinated by the concept of talking birds. He had taken to spending hours in the aviary, attempting to teach Earth bird calls to his own species' psychic spores. The results were mixed, to say the least. More than one student had been startled by the sudden psychic projection of a squawked pollywonta cracker in their minds. Even Professor Shinthrop had been bitten by the pet bug. He had recently acquired a small terrarium containing a group of Earth tardigrades, which he found endlessly fascinating. Did you know, he would tell anyone who would listen, that these microscopic creatures can survive in the vacuum of space? Remarkable. Simply remarkable. As the end of the semester approached, it was clear that the Bring Your Pet to School initiative had been a resounding success, though perhaps not in the way anyone had anticipated. Yes, there had been some mishaps along the way. There was the incident with the escaped tarantula in the zero-gravity physics lab, and no one would soon forget the day Jake's alligator, Snappy, decided to take an unauthorized swim in the quantum probability pool. But overall, the presence of Earth pets on campus had done more to foster interspecies understanding and cooperation than a dozen diplomatic summits. It all came to a head at the end-of-year Interstellar Cultural Festival. Traditionally, this had been a rather staid affair, with each species showcasing their traditional art, music, and cuisine. This year, however, things were different. The festival grounds were a riot of activity. Humans and aliens alike milled about, many with pets in tow. There were dog agility courses, cat grooming demonstrations, and even a scales and tails exhibit featuring an assortment of reptiles and amphibians. Zixilorp, who had once been terrified at the mere thought of Earth animals, was now proudly showing off his new pet, a small, fluffy hamster he had named Quantum. "You see," he explained to a group of fascinated Plutonians, "Quantum here exhibits properties of both particle and wave. Sometimes he's in his wheel, sometimes he's in his little house, and sometimes he seems to be in both places at once." The Plutonians nodded sagely, clearly impressed by this deep philosophical observation. Nearby, Blurp was giving a demonstration on the proper care of better fish. He hadn't managed to adopt a shark, but he'd found that the colorful fighting fish appealed to his gelatinous nature. "Now, it's important to remember," Blurp burbled, his voice taking on a professorial tone, that despite their name, better fish should not be encouraged to fight. They're quite happy to display their fins peacefully if given enough space. Even the faculty had got in on the act. Professor Shinthrop had set up a holographic display showcasing his beloved tardigrades, magnified to the size of small dogs. Alien students oohed and ahed as the microscopic creatures lumbered across the display, looking for all the world like tiny, eight-legged bears. As the festival wound down, Dean Zix later took to the stage to give a closing speech. The venerable Andromedan looked out over the sea of faces, human, alien, and animal alike, and felt a swell of pride. When we first announced the Bring Your Pet to School initiative, the dean began, his tentacles gesticulating expressively, I'll admit. There were those who thought it was a recipe for disaster. Deathworlder pets on campus, they said. It'll be chaos. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. And yes, the dean continued. A twinkle in his compound eyes. There was a bit of chaos, but there was also learning, understanding, and dare I say it, friendship. He gestured to the crowd, where humans and aliens stood side by side, many with pets at their feet or in their arms or draped around their shoulders. Look around you, the dean said. What do you see? I see the future. A future where the differences between us are not barriers but bridges, where we learn from each other, grow together, and build a galactic community that celebrates diversity in all its forms, be it tentacled, furred, scaled, or feathered. The crowd erupted in cheers, a cacophony of human voices, alien vocalizations, and enthusiastic animal sounds. And so the dean concluded, his voice rising over the noise, it gives me great pleasure to announce that the Bring Your Pet to School initiative will be made permanent, effective immediately. The cheering grew even louder. Zixilorp found himself swept up in the excitement, waving his tentacles in the air and letting out a trilling sound of joy. Quantum the hamster, nestled safely in a special containment sphere designed by the engineering department, spun his wheel in apparent approval. As the celebration continued, Zixilorp felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Todd standing there, Rex at his side as always. Hey, Zixilorp, Todd said with a grin. Remember how freaked out you were when you first saw Rex? Look at you now, a proud pet owner yourself. Zixilorp's skin flushed a deep purple in embarrassment. Yes, well, I suppose I may have overreacted a bit. Your Earth creatures are not quite as terrifying as I initially thought. Todd laughed. High praise indeed. You know, Rex here has grown quite fond of you. I think he considers you part of his pack now. As if to confirm this, Rex let out a soft woof and wagged his tail, looking up at Zixilorp with unmistakable affection. Zixilorp felt a warm glow in his central cavity. I'm honored, he said, reaching down to pat Rex's head. I never thought I'd say this, but I've grown quite fond of him too. And Quantum. Of course, he added hastily, glancing at his hamster. It's amazing how much things have changed, Todd mused. When I first came to Galactic University, I was worried about fitting in. I mean, being a Deathworlder isn't exactly a selling point in most of the galaxy. Zixilorp nodded sympathetically. He remembered the initial wariness many students had shown towards their human classmates. But now, Todd continued, it's like the whole campus has come together, and it's all thanks to our pets. Indeed, Zixilorp agreed. Who would have thought that creatures we initially saw as terrifying monsters would end up being the greatest diplomats the galaxy has ever seen? As they spoke, more of their classmates joined them. Blurp oozed over, his better fish swimming contentedly in a hovering water sphere. Lisa arrived with Noodle draped around her shoulders, the snake's scales glinting in the light of the setting suns. Even Jake was there, though thankfully without Snappy the alligator. The dean had drawn the line at large aquatic reptiles attending the festival. Together, this motley crew of humans, aliens, and animals stood watching the celebration. The sight was a testament to how far they'd come, from fear and misunderstanding to friendship and mutual respect. You know, Blurt burbled thoughtfully, I think we've learned something important here. It's not about where we come from or what we look like. It's about the connections we make. Well said, Lisa agreed, scratching Noodle under the chin. Our pets might be different from us, but they're part of our families. And now, I feel like we're all part of one big, weird, intergalactic family. Zixilorp found himself nodding in agreement. If someone had told him at the beginning of the semester that he'd be standing here, surrounded by Earth animals and feeling perfectly at ease, he would have thought they were mad. Yet here he was, and he wouldn't have it any other way. As the festival wound down and the twin moons rose in the sky, the humans' dogs began their nightly chorus. But this time, they weren't alone. Alien voices joined in, the melodious trills of the Syrians. the resonant hums of the Andromedans, even the subsonic vibrations of the Jovians. It was a symphony of diversity, a celebration of their differences and their newfound unity. Professor Shinthrop, standing nearby, shook his head in amazement. "Simply remarkable," he murmured, his scales shimmering with emotion. "I do believe we've witnessed the birth of a new era in interspecies relations." And as the strange, beautiful music filled the air, Zexylob couldn't help but agree. The galaxy would never be the same again, and that, he realized, was a wonderful thing. In the years to come, the story of how Earth Pets transformed Galactic University would be told and retold. It would become a legend, a shining example of how understanding and compassion could bridge even the widest of gaps. And it all started with a simple announcement: Deathworlders are now allowed to bring their pets to class. Who could have guessed that those words would change the course of galactic history? But then again, as the humans were fond of saying, sometimes the best things in life come in small, furry packages. As the celebration continued into the night, filled with laughter, barks, meows, and the occasional reptilian hiss, one thing was clear: the future of the galaxy was bright, and it was going to be a whole lot furrier than anyone had ever imagined.